Alrighty, sorry if the audio sounds a little weird. I have to have this microphone really close to my mouth in order for it to pick up my voice very well. And for some reason, the mic on my webcam itself isn't working. Anyways, the topic of this video is going to be the 2013 Arnold Classic. I know it's a little bit late. It's been a few weeks since the competition, but someone on the bodybuilding.com forum mentioned it and how I should probably, see about making videos about it, And I think that's a good idea. I just kind of use my YouTube channel to talk about whatever I feel like. I like the Arnold Classic. It was pretty good, but one of the things I wanted to say first off the bat was too many competitors showing up with distended guts. Some people on the forum I know get upset when you mention the gut, but it was horrendous how many people showed up with it. Even Hidetada Yamagishi, usually one of my favorite competitors, showed up, looking like he swallowed a watermelon. And he, to my recollection, I can't, remember him ever showing up like that. So this was the first time I've ever seen that on him. Even Dexter Jackson, the winner, had a little bit of distension. Not as much as the other guys, but he was a little bit bloated. Mostly at the prejudging, but it was still a little bit there at the finals. But Dexter Jackson still looked really amazing, and I believe deserved the win. Nobody really challenged him. Easily the top guy there looked the best, in my opinion. The guy just looks, that literally statuesque. He looks like a living statue. Like he could just stand there, and you could, make a sculpture out of him. He just looks, darn near perfect. Nothing out of proportion, well, other than calves, but not very many competitive bodybuilders these days have big calves. But, everything just, it was very conditioned. He had that really round 3D look. His shoulders were capped. Everything. And he looked pretty thick and full as well. And his fullness was really crazy. His muscle just had that pop to it. And I remember reading somewhere, I forget where it was, someone complaining how, Dexter was off just because he wasn't at his all-time best. Literally, his all-time best, which was probably the Masters. I agree with folks saying that was probably the best we've ever seen Dexter Jackson at the Masters. He showed new details in his back and legs that he usually either never or usually doesn't have. He just looked ridiculous at the Masters Olympia. Another competition he deserved to win. And here, he was a little bit softer, just as full, if not a little bit fuller, And we're talking about, the guy's in his 40s. If someone says he's off just because he's not at his literally all-time best, I think that's a little strange. How many competitors, nail it, quote-unquote, 100%, every single time? It doesn't happen, And usually, people will always have that one show where they just looked absolutely amazing. And Dexter looks amazing at, almost every show he's competed in. A few years there he was on the downtrend, but, got back onto it since working with George Farah and Charles Glass. But anyways, I don't think he was off at the Arnold Classic. At his all-time 100% absolute best, no. But, he's pretty darn close, and he's really, really good. He definitely didn't look soft. He was in his usual shredded condition. What can I say? The blade's back, Definitely want to see him show up on at the Olympia and see how he can place well there now against the top guys. I don't expect him to win it again, but, just to see him come in on, that would be great. And another thing about the distension, I'm really glad Bob Ciccarello interviewed Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's on musculardevelopment.com. And Arnold was quick to point out the distension problems that some of the competitors had. And he said, quote, that one of the guys even looked 5 to 6 months pregnant, okay? What can I say? It was just horrible sometimes, Marcus Haley's rolling ab shot obviously gained much criticism. That was ridiculous. He should never do that. What can I say? Marcus Haley, from his posts and stuff, or his interviews and stuff like that, he seems like a really nice guy. But so it's not saying anything personal about him. It's just as a competitive bodybuilder, he needs to control the waist, and so did some of the other guys too. Ben Pekulski came to mind, supposedly due to food poisoning, whatever. I don't know if it's true or not. Obviously, I wasn't there. I wasn't in, backstage or whatever, But he definitely had distension issues as well. I can see why the judges put him in second, because he was huge, and very muscular, very ripped. Would I have had him in second? No, but I can see why the judges had him in second, because it's a subjective sport, so people are going to, judge about what they think is best, And another thing is when people say, oh, if they emphasize condition, or if they emphasize this or that, this guy should have been ahead, or this guy should have been ahead. Well, it doesn't work that way. It's always about who has the best overall package. In fact, the winner of a show might not be the best in any particular category. They might not be the biggest. They might not be the most shredded. They might not be the most aesthetic. It's supposed to be the guy who has the best combination of all of that. And second place is supposed to be the best combination of all of that. So that's why sometimes the guy in second will look totally different from the guy in first, and will totally different from the guy in third even, For example, Tony Freeman, who came in third, I would have had him ahead of Ben Kolsky, because he had Tony Freeman, true to his name, to his nickname, the X-Man. He just has that great structure, flaring thighs, wide lats, and he's a tall guy, so it's hard to have that frame filled out too. And not that that should factor into it, that just because it's harder for him to do it, but he looked great. I do agree with the criticism. Some people were tossing his way on the forum how he was a bit flat, and his conditioning was a little bit washed out compared to previous. I think he was sharper at the Masters, but his quads weren't quite as down as at the Masters. They were still a little bit down from what we've seen from Tony, but I think overall he improved since then. And I don't even remember the rest of the placings, honestly. I do remember Cedric McMillan came in 6th, and some people, there was this one guy, I forget his name, Leaf45 or something, I don't know, on the bodybuilding.com forum, saying, where are all these pictures of Cedric McMillan getting owned and blah, blah, blah. And I was just thinking, dude, no one said he got owned. Nobody said that he, had his ass handed to him. Nobody said that. Okay, the point is that he got beat. He lost. Doesn't matter if it's by 1 point, 5 points, or 10 points. Losing's losing. You place, below the next highest points. The guy with the next highest number of points. That's how it works. Even doesn't matter if you're owned or if you just barely got edged out. That's how it works. And I didn't see the judges' scorecards. Maybe they have that somewhere online. I don't know. I know sometimes for the Olympia they have it. Personally, I think a good change to the bodybuilding would be for judges for the whole judging panel to have their scorecard, the scores for the athletes made public, right after prejudging. So that way we all know where the competitors are at. And usually you have a good sense of where the competitors are at based on the call-outs in the comparison rounds. But still, I would like to see, just from a fan's perspective, I would like to see the scorecards made public after the prejudging, and then once again at the finals, so that way we can see how the competitors did in the judges' eyes at prejudging, and what sort of stuff happened between then and the finals. And the reason I say this is because, for example, in the 2008 Olympia where Dexter Jackson, 09, sorry, 08 Dexter won it, but in 09 Dexter came in third, and I definitely think he beat Branch that year. Maybe not in some of the subsequent years where Dexter was a little bit off and he was softer than usual, but in 2009, Dexter was not off at all. I mean, his arm imbalance was a little bit worse, but that was about it. Basically, I feel in 2009 he combined his 2008 Olympia size with the conditioning of the 2008 Arnold Classic, which was his goal, and I think he accomplished it. It's just that Jay Cutler was too much to handle that year. He came in big as well as, pretty ripped. And if you look at the scorecards there, Dexter Jackson was ahead of Branch at prejudging, but then fell, dramatically. He was, I think ended up 17 points behind Branch by the finals. How that happens, I have no clue, because Branch, if anything, he looked the same at the finals, and Dexter looked, maybe the same, if not a little bit better. So how he fell that far behind, I have no clue. But anyways, that's one reason I would like to have the scorecards made public after prejudging and after finals. Just so we stay in the loop as fans, And will it change the judging? Maybe, maybe not. But I'll say some of the fans will probably get a little more outraged based on the placings. They'll probably say, how did this guy fall that far behind? If we see something that looks a little bit, strange to us, it's going to be talked about, whether it's on the forum or whether it's there in the crowd if you're at a show or whatever the case may be. Well, anyways, back to the Arnold Classic. Cedric McMillan, like I said, forgot who placed 4th and 5th. Cedric McMillan placed 6th. Okay, now I remember. Hide got 5th. How he beat Cedric McMillan, I have no clue. Now, Cedric McMillan, his Achilles heel has been conditioning, meaning he's not as ripped. For those of you who don't follow bodybuilding, doesn't have that cut look. I mean, he does, but just compared to the other top guys, he doesn't. So it's a relative thing because you're on stage, and really it's all about comparison. It's about who else is standing on the stage that day. Cedric I think probably showed the leanest Cedric that we've ever seen, or close to it, and with still that Cedric size, because I know a few years back, his family was in a serious car accident and stuff, and he came back on stage, and he just had lost a whole ton of size from not training and having to, be with his family and stuff, and luckily they're all okay now. But anyways, so his Achilles heel has been the conditioning, and I thought he showed up in shape, but still not as good in good enough shape to compare to the very top guys at the Arnold Classic. Now, that being said, I still would have had him higher than 6th. I have no clue how Hidetaka Yamagishi beat him, and I like Hide. I think he's a great bodybuilder. He represents his country very well. I think he's the only Japanese IFBB pro, but I still would have had Cedric higher than him, especially because Hide had the gut, basically. I mean, it's not just a little bit of dissension. Hide was showing a gut, okay? And Hide's not a huge guy either. He's a shorter, smaller guy, and he's known for his conditioning and his aesthetics. I mean, even though his lats could use more development to improve his V-taper, overall he has all right proportions. But here, I mean, the waist just threw everything off, and his conditioning was all right, but I mean, really, his core was just it was an eyesore. And Cedric has a really tight waist. He's a tall guy as well, that he has enough size that his frame is basically, close to being filled out. I would like to see him with bigger hamstrings, bigger traps, bigger calves, obviously. And how much he can help his calves, I don't know, because that a lot of people say does has a lot to do with your genetics. Some people just slaughter their calves training, and they only gain minimal size. But nonetheless, Cedric has that classic physique. He has that X-frame just like Tony Freeman. And his waist, I think, is even smaller than Tony Freeman's. And Cedric's back double biceps was excellent. His front lat spread and his front double biceps are excellent, again, because of the small waist. And his flats just explode outward. What can I say? Like I said, I'd like to see his hamstrings bigger, to see them drop more from the side. Now remember, Johnny Jackson's one of the guys who placed ahead of him. Again, I think Johnny Jackson was a little bit more conditioned. Not like a ton more conditioned, but I think he was a little bit more conditioned. His cuts were a little deeper. Someone on the forum mentioned, that Leaf guy mentioned how, JOJ's cuts are deeper, but he doesn't have more. I'm like, okay, maybe, but you know what? Conditioning, your cuts being deeper is part of conditioning. That's part of how ripped you are. It's how deep those striations are. And Johnny has that freak factor, Now, granted, would I have had Johnny Jackson ahead of Cedric McMillan? No. Me personally, I would not have, because JOJ still needs to work on his legs, And that reminds me, Ed Nunn, granted, his legs dominate his upper body, but I mean, if Johnny Jackson's upper body dominates his legs, then why is he up there? Why is Ed Nunn not up there? And Ed Nunn had great conditioning, and Ed Nunn has a nice, tight, tiny waist, much closer to that classic look. Now, Johnny Jackson's waist is not big, and he does have a great V-taper because his back's insane. But I would have had Ed Nunn up there. I mean, at least in 6th, beating Hide. I don't think Hide had any business being in the top 6 of this show. And like I said, I would have had Cedric higher, but it was obvious that Cedric was not as lean as the top guys. Would I have had, Cedric winning? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. I think he could have gotten 4th, possibly 3rd. That's where I would have had him. I probably would have had him, around 4th, battling it out for, 4th and 3rd or something. But it does get hard because sometimes it's apples to oranges. Like Ben Pekulski, where would he have been? In my eyes, basically. Maybe third, but then again, I mean, if Ed Nunn's up there getting compared to him, maybe Ben would have fallen down to as far as fifth instead of second because he just doesn't have that same structure. Now, granted, maybe the judges just took his size into account that much because he is a really, really thick guy. But for what I think bodybuilding does need to return back to, its roots in that sense of having the good structure, the tight waist, not at the expense of everything else, but it's just, I think it's not emphasized enough these days. For a while in like the early 2000s, it was that people felt size was getting emphasized way too much and the guts were getting out of hand and stuff like that. Now, sometimes that shows it seems maybe they emphasize conditioning a little too much at the expense of other things, even aesthetics. And I think maybe they need to emphasize aesthetics a little bit more. But again, it is difficult because the sport's subjective, and it's all about who has the best overall appearance for what the bodybuilding ideal should be. And what else did I want to say? Johnny Jackson, what can I say? He showed up pretty darn good. This was probably one of the best packages we've seen from him. What else? Just some certain standout things. I wanted to get back to Dexter Jackson, the winner. Just to sum up, he had crazy fullness, that classic Dexter Jackson conditioning. He is also another one of those guys who has that classic look. He has a nice tight waist. Again, at this show, his waist was not the best that it's been. It was a little distended. But even then, for me, he still had the best overall appearance. And he's not one of the biggest guys, but he's gained a lot of size over the years. And for people, you still have some of those haters out there who say he never changes from show to show. I mean, he started bodybuilding as a bantamweight. And I think on Pro Bodybuilding Weekly or somewhere else, they mentioned that he turned pro as a light heavyweight. I mean, these days you can't do any damage as a pro unless you turn pro as a super heavyweight in the amateurs. So Dexter Jackson, just that in itself is impressive for one, and that shows that, yeah, he has made changes. And you go back in previous pictures, and you can see that he's made improvements, and he's gained size and stuff like that. He's gained size in his arms, in his triceps, in his lats especially. His lats have come up a long way since when he first started. His back just looks insane. From the rear relaxed stance, I mean, his lats explode outward. Like someone on the forum said, he looks like a mini Ronnie Coleman from the back. I mean, that's just the polish that he has, the development that he has. Everything is that is what you call a complete bodybuilder. Like I said, minus the calves, but given that so few other people have great calves, it really doesn't matter on the pro stage for him. And his quads showed up pretty sharp, and usually for Dexter, that's a very difficult area for him. Sometimes his quads lose separation. I don't know if he just doesn't tense them enough, or maybe that's just where fat comes off the last place. For other people, the judges emphasize the glutes. They look right at the glutes. Are glute striations there? Yes, then they're in condition. If not, then no, they're not. I think that's silly because some people just have some people store their fat in different places naturally. Some people have naturally just shredded glutes. Ronnie Coleman had glute striations in the off season, and you could tell he was, holding body fat everywhere. But he just had a really muscular glutes, so maybe that had something to do with it. Maybe that having more muscle there made them show more striations. I don't know, but for whatever reason, Ronnie Coleman's back and glutes were always, showing striations and stuff. Even the off season, it was just insane. And then you got people like Troy Alves, who has a great physique. A very classic-looking physique. His legs could come up a bit, and I'll get to that in a second. Troy Alves wasn't here at the show. I'm just using this to illustrate my point. The judges always penalize him for not having striated glutes, and for having super, super sharp hamstrings. And, he looks like a damn mummy when he does come in, as shredded as they want. And if you ask me, those times that he's been rewarded with a win or second place or whatever, to me, that he comes in too small, too conditioned or whatever, because when he gets in that type of shape to where the glutes are and even then, they're not shredded. And then you start getting a little bit of sharpness to him. But when he gets to that point, he starts losing a lot more size in his legs. And I actually think he looks better coming in a little fuller, even if his glutes are a bit soft, with his leg size still there, to balance out his lats, because he has an excellent V-taper. And I think that's an example right there of the judges emphasizing conditioning over aesthetics. Because I think, again, the sport's subjective, because it's based on what you like, right? But, also the body, bodybuilder's supposed to have that X-frame and stuff. But I guess the judges want him to show up sharper, but I don't like that look as much for him as when he comes in fuller with the leg size a little bit more up, even if his glutes aren't so shredded. And what else was I going to say? Overall, I like the show. It was pretty good. Glad Dexter won. He tied Flex Wheeler's record for 4 times winning the Arnold Classic. And another thing for the haters of Dexter Jackson, I mean, you can't fade this guy. You just can't ignore his resume, basically, his bodybuilding career. I mean, he's racked up all sorts of wins by now. He's one of the smaller guys to win an Olympia. He's the only person to win an Olympia and a Masters Olympia. And now he's another thing. On the 25th anniversary of the Arnold Classic, he made history and tied Flex Wheeler for the record of all time, most wins at the Arnold Classic. And and that's an accolade in itself, because Flex Wheeler is considered one of the greatest of all time, and I consider Flex Wheeler one of the greatest of all time. And now, I mean, there's no way you can't count Dexter as one of the greatest of all time, tying that record plus an Olympia, plus a Masters Olympia. That's ridiculous. And there's always going to be those haters out there, But me personally, Dexter Jackson is one of my favorites since I first started following the modern competitions of bodybuilding, which was probably like 2002 or 2003. No way, I think it was late 2001 or something like that. 01, 02, somewhere around there. But ever since then, Dexter's been one of my favorites. He actually, is my favorite, just because like I said, I think the guy has like perfect proportions, and he's every muscle's developed, and for back then, the reason I liked him is because he had a tight waist and he was always showing up shredded, always, and it's just been nice to see how his career has progressed, and I definitely hope to see him, continue, doing his best, and we'll see how long he can stay up there. And that's my little Arnold Classic, my thoughts on the Arnold Classic.